Tonight is Monday, April 21st. It is 6:30 p.m. and this is the regular Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. That is a call to order. Roll call. We have a quorum, and in fact, all members are present. And the next item would be the introduction of agenda and format of hearing.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. First, we are going to have a call to order, followed by a staff report. Then the applicant will have their presentation. Then the public comments will be open to share support or opposition. Please state your name and address for the record, and please be brief and to the point within a 3-minute time frame. Then the commission and staff will have their discussion, and the commission will then vote to recommend approval as presented, approval with conditions, denial of the request, or to table the item. City Council's consideration of tonight's zone change will be on the Monday, May 12th, 2025 meeting. And on to the consent agenda. Tonight we have an excusal of the absences of 2 commissioners and approval of the minutes. And then we also have 2 preliminary plats. And then on new business tonight, we have 1 final plat followed by 1 zoning case. Thank you, Chair. I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Excuse me, Chair. Could we just announce for the purposes of the record the thing that's not on the agenda in case there's any confusion, or if anybody's online watching and they know to tune in later?
I would love to. It's not on the agenda, so I don't know the zone number. Does somebody go ahead.
So what's not on the agenda tonight is zoning case ZON 2025-0069.
And that is the parcel, I would say the continuation of HEB all the way past Academy and Hobby Lobby, that vacant land to the north of it, and also on the other side of the creek for those that are watching or listening.
That's correct.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
Thanks for the reminder. I was asked to do that and forgot. The consent agenda is next, and I will step out here, and also Commissioner Ordino will as well. Thank you.
Okay, as far as the consent agenda, I'll entertain a motion in a second for approval.
Commissioner McDonald to approve.
Commissioner Henrichs, second.
All right, we have any discussion on it? Seeing none, call for the vote. All those in favor, sign by raising your right hand. Passes 5-0. We can bring them back in.
Take notes. So that's it for the consent agenda. I'm assuming no items were pulled, so we can skip that portion. We can go to new business, which is first is consideration possible action CPL 2025-0097. That is the final plat of Dixie Farm Commercial Subdivision. A request by Garrett Carter of Hankins Development, the applicant, on behalf of Anthony Giuliani, owner, for approval of final plat of Dixie Farm Commercial Subdivision, creating 4 lots on approximately 9.6 acres of land. The general location being 3205 Dixie Farm Road. How about a motion for approval and a second, please?
Motion to approve.
Eisenberg, second.
All right, then staff report, please.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Katie Peterson. I'm a planner too, and I'm presenting the application. Tonight you have the request for a final plat of the Dixie Farm Commercial plat. It is zoned neighborhood services with the general commercial zoning to the north, northwest, with R1 to the southwest, and then R3 to the southeast, and R4 to the northeast. So you've got a handful of different residential zonings and then general commercial on 2 sides of the property. The plat is as shown on the screen in front of you and was found in your packet. And staff recommends approval of the final plat with the condition that the maintenance agreement for the shared drainage be recorded and identified on the plat, as otherwise it meets the criteria as found below. This item was something that was addressed at the preliminary plat. They're still working on finalizing that, but they have begun the process and just need to ensure they finalize that document before staff feels that the criteria have been met. Add in staff.
That concludes staff report.
That's
All righty. Then if the applicant is here, and does the applicant wish to make a presentation? If you would, please identify yourself and address, name and address, please.
Yes, sir. My name's Garrett Carter. My address is 419 Alamo Street, Lake Charles, Louisiana. I don't have much other than the maintenance agreement. We expect it back from the attorneys today or tomorrow, at which point we'll have that recorded. And the plat is already with a guy that can actually amend the Mylar to make sure that that's noted on there correctly. So we actually anticipate having everything done by the end of this week. So it's well in motion, to kind of keep everything moving. So y'all have any questions?
Unfortunately, we're not able to dialogue in this portion. If we have some,
Yes, sir.
we'll call
Okay,
you back,
thank you.
please. Thank you, sir. All right, that gets us to the next one, that's persons wishing to speak for or against. Anyone wishing to speak for or against? Seeing no movement, we'll go then to staff, commission, applicant discussions. Do we need to amend the motion to add the condition?
Yes, sir. Staff's recommendation would be to conditionally approve the plat, with the condition being that the maintenance agreement for the shared drainage be recorded and identified on the plat. So
I would make a motion that we amend the motion to include the condition that the maintenance agreement for the shared drainage be recorded and identified on the plat.
Commissioner Echols, second.
With that, if there's no further discussion, we will take a vote on the amended motion first, and then the motion itself second. All right, so all those in favor of the amended motion, please signify by raising your right hand. Measure passes 7-0. So then we'll move into the vote itself for the final plat. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Measure again passes 7-0. We didn't have any questions after all. Thank you, and that moves us to item 2 under new business, which is consideration and possible action, zone change application zone 24-28. And this is a public hearing, a request by Paige McKee, applicant, on behalf of Dixie Farm Property LLC, the owner, for approval of zone change for 15.91 acres of land from light industrial M1 and heavy industrial M2 district to planned development, or PD district, for a proposed RV, trailer, and boat storage facility. The general location being the northeast of the intersection of Dixie Farm Road and Main Street, Pearland, Texas. A motion for approval and a second, please.
So moved.
Commissioner Haskins, second.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Patrick Bauer, and I'm a Planner 2 with the city. As mentioned, the request for you tonight is for a planned development for a proposed RV, trailer, and boat storage facility, and kind of a little summary on the request. If you remember, this was originally heard at the March 3rd P&Z meeting. At that meeting, staff recommended approval with conditions pertaining to facade articulation, stacking and parking, fencing, and landscaping. And following those discussions during that meeting, the P&Z decided to postpone the request to allow time for the applicant to work through some of those discussions and deviations with staff. And following that meeting, staff and the applicant had a meeting to kind of go through those deviations and worked through some of them. And the applicant, prior to this meeting, provided an updated PD document, which main topics that were covered were the driveway configuration, which was mentioned in the previous meeting, landscaping for the site, proposed and existing, articulation and transparency, as well as the fencing for the property. And it should be noted as well that the actual number of units is not changing with this updated PD. It's still 131 covered spaces for storage and 246 fully enclosed units. And as we move forward through the exhibits, I'll be outlining these updates that have been made. And so to date, staff has received 13 written comments in support of the proposed PD request. And kind of just to go very briefly over the surrounding zoning, it's a mixture of mostly light industrial zoning M1, a darker to the west is M2, and then to the east is the extraterritorial jurisdiction, or ETJ. The future place type for the property, as well as everything around it, is the professional services place type. And kind of looking at some of the surrounding uses, it's mostly, as you can notice, manufacturing and warehousing surrounding it on 3 sides, with the landfill on the east side, which is outside of the city limits. And so moving through, this first slide that we're looking at is the design plan. And if you looked at it, comparison, not a whole lot has changed with the units and like where the detention's located, but the main specific thing, which will be able to be seen a little better in the next slide with the rendering, is the driveway configuration. If you remember, that original site plan kind of had some inconsistencies between the rendering and the design plan. The applicant has made them consistent, and they're proposing a 35-foot shared driveway with the property to the south, southwest of them. And so it'll be a shared driveway that essentially breaks off into the 2 properties. And it should be noted that it's 90 feet from the street to the actual where the gate will be on the property. And so one of the points that was brought up during the meeting was about stacking. So that's where the driveway configuration helps to clarify some of those stacking questions. And so here you can notice the shared driveway off of Dixie Farm right here, the shared driveway that'll go to the property to the south, as well as the proposed development. And then next, kind of going through the landscaping for the property, kind of briefly going over what the previous submittal included. It included a mixture of preserving some existing landscaping, as well as proposing some new landscaping. So in terms of the existing, they were proposing to maintain that existing vegetation along Dixie Farm Road to kind of serve as the corridor overlay district buffer. And there'll be future images to show that again with updated pictures, because I think the previous slides from the previous meeting had the winter foliage. Now we have spring foliage. So of course, winter to spring looks a little different. And then in terms of another aspect that was identified in the landscape plan originally was the boundaries around kind of more on the northern, eastern, and southern side of the property was identified as natural vegetation to be preserved. And then they were also at that time proposing landscaping along the frontage of the property, along that fencing, and along those interior parking spaces. And just to mention some of the conditions that staff had at that time was providing more specifics on kind of what the proposed landscaping would be, the plantings, and what would be kind of more like spacing and height requirements. And then providing more specifics on the natural vegetation around those other boundaries with the north, east, and south boundaries. And so this is a portion of the revised landscape plan. So it should be noted that for the proposed landscaping specifically, the applicant has provided standards within the PD document stating in text what is to be provided. So they're essentially stating, hey, along the fencing, we'll have ornamental trees for 50 feet. And then we'll have our shrubs will be 3 feet tall with a spacing of like 36 inches or 3 feet in between. So they provided those specifics on what will be provided for the proposed landscaping, which allows for regulations to be easier to regulate and easier to implement at the time of permitting. And then in terms of the natural vegetation, this area stayed the same. They're looking to preserve it in its entirety. and remain as that corridor overlay district buffer. And then it should be noted in between the original PD and this PD, the vegetation, this natural vegetation, originally they had it called out as being preserved, and now it's being just identified as natural vegetation. And it should be noted that this area is not actually required by code, with it being next to industrial areas or next to the landfill. We don't have a buffering requirement between two M1 properties that aren't doing where they're not doing outside storage. They have storage within buildings. So it should be noted that that's not a requirement of the code. And so looking at this slide, this is a little closer look, and you also get a good look at how the driveway actually looks coming into the property with Dixie Farm at the top of your image, but kind of shows a little bit of an aspect of, with that fencing and the pipeline, there's to be a minimum 6-foot planting area where the shrubs and the ornamental trees will kind of be in the same line. So you won't have ornamental trees that are spaced out from the shrubs, because we're trying to maintain that pipeline easement, but also have a fence for the property. So this kind of shows, hey, along this stretch, you'll have the mixture of shrubs and ornamental trees. And here, just kind of looking first, and a couple slides, we'll get to the articulation transparency, but I know you can already kind of see it, but this is more of a representation of, hey, we have the fencing and we're showing the shrubs, as well as, hey, here's a tree every 50 feet to show you kind of a representation of what that will look like in the end. And here again is just this is more of the spring foliage, not the winter, because I know I showed you the previous slide, it looked a little barren. This looks a little more like spring has hit and it's actually more lush. So showing how the existing vegetation looks at the front of the property. And then moving on to the articulation and transparency, and first kind of looking at the articulation. If you'll remember previously, the request was to waive the articulation requirement fully, and that request has been revised to request that it be reduced down to 1 foot in depth for every 20 feet of kind of building frontage along Dixie Farm. So this is only for those buildings that face Dixie Farm. Any other, and just those 3 buildings. So let me just clarify really quick, just the 3 buildings at the front here. No other buildings would be subject to this because they're not seen from Dixie Farm Road. They're requesting to have that reduction from originally it'd be 1 foot for every 10 feet. They're requesting for the 1 foot for every 20 feet, and they'll be incorporating a mixture, and you'll notice on the image or rendering, incorporating a stone veneer with inset windows to meet that articulation requirement. And then in terms of the transparency requirement, if you'll remember, they previously had the proposed wall lights, which is kind of translucent. You can kind of see through it, and the commission had questions about that, and they've changed the deviation there to reduce the requirement for the transparency from 15% of the facade to 5%. And they've noted that's for aesthetic purposes and security and liability, and the windows will be opaque to protect stored contents from view. So it's kind of playing with the articulation is what they're proposing for the transparency, but moving away from the wall light and back to a window with a reduction, and it's to be opaque to screen stored contents. And here we just get kind of a partial elevation just to show another image of how the facade will look with those incorporations of the stone veneer and the proposed transparent opaque windows, especially with kind of height of building compared to the height of the fence and the landscaping. So you kind of get a representation of what will be screened and what you will be able to see from the road. And then this is a minor one, but the fencing is staying the same in every aspect, except the applicant has added to the actual text of the PD that they shall provide a 8-foot tall. So it's more of just clarifying the height. The same materials being provided, just the height has been added to the PD text to say it shall be 8 feet. And then just a quick recap. Some of these are exactly the same, so I won't go through them deeply, but these first 3 deviations are exactly the same. And essentially the first one was to allow for the mini warehouse to go on Dixie Farm Road with the new requirements. And then the second one has to do with it being allowed to be outdoor storage and not just be accessory to the use. So it's to allow for more than just the accessory aspect for the lot to allow for more to be outdoor and not climate controlled. And then the third one pertains to that deviation from the parking to move those temporary parking spaces inside and then, but still have the stacking spaces before you get to the gate of the property to kind of allow for the stacking. But normally the code would require 5 spaces outside of the gate, but they're moving that to be inside, to be interior to the gate. And then the two that saw them changes to them are, as we mentioned, were the articulation and the transparency, with the articulation being reduced from being fully waived to being reduced down to 1 foot for every 20 feet. And then the transparency being changed to a reduction from 15% to 5%. And these last 3 are also staying exactly the same. There's been no change. So the first one has to do with that existing vegetation along Dixie Farm Road. And it's more to say that that's to be preserved and used as the corridor overlay district buffer. And then the second deviation has to do with the fencing, which fencing is staying exactly the same as previously presented. And the third one has to do with the pedestrian sidewalk that is typically required with developments to connect the sidewalk along Dixie Farm to the building entry, but without a retail, they're requesting to remove that requirement. So just kind of going very briefly, the next 3 slides will be very similar to the previous meeting, but kind of looking at the criteria for establishing a planned development district. Staff found that the request met criterion 5, which states that the land serves as a transition between different and seemingly incompatible land uses. And while it's mostly industrial around it, it does provide a transition between the landfill to the east and Dixie Farm Road, which is one of our major corridors, so it kind of provides that buffer from the landfill. And then in terms of the comprehensive plan, the proposed self-storage facility is not consistent with the professional services and industrial place type, as developments in this place type focus mostly on light industrial uses, including kind of clean manufacturing centers, technology centers, and other uses that would typically occupy flex space in commercial buildings. And then in terms of the thoroughfare plan and the utilities for the site, it does meet those two. And kind of looking at the approval criteria for a PD, staff found that the request met 5 of the 7 approval criteria for a plan development, and specifically criterion 2 pertains to the comprehensive plan as previously stated. And then criterion 3, while it does not fully meet this criterion, because while you need the PD to do this use now, there's certain aspects, while the articulation has been brought up and improved upon from being fully waived, they're still requesting some deviations. And so to create a superior development, they're kind of balancing out the superior development versus the requested deviations, and staff found that wasn't fully being balanced out with what was being requested. And therefore, it does not fully meet this criterion. But while the proposed use is not consistent with the future land use plan, staff finds that the proposed use is consistent with the surrounding uses, those industrial uses in the landfill, and it provides a good buffer between the Dixie Farm Road and the landfill to the east. And it should also be noted, as kind of gone through with the slides regarding the exhibits, the applicant has addressed staff's previous concerns and conditions regarding, for one, the articulation from being fully waived to incorporating more materials and kind of playing with the facade to create more offsets and more variation. In terms of parking, it was more inconsistencies between the plans, but they've made those inconsistencies consistent, and now we're able to say they do have the stacking as needed to allow for 5 spaces to be interior, but allow for a car to, hey, if it's stacking, it's not sitting into someone else's property or stacking out into the right of way. And then in terms of landscaping, the specifics have been provided on the actual proposed landscaping for the site. And as previously mentioned, while the vegetation around the boundaries on like the north side, the east side, and the south side, while that was previously proposed to be preserved, it should be noted that those areas, with it just saying natural vegetation, they could be removed by the applicant, but those aren't actually required areas, and the P&Z should consider whether preservation of those areas is feasible for the applicant. We'd hate for it to, we call for it to be preserved, and then it's actually a construction issue where they could never preserve it because they were trying to put in their building at the required setback. So kind of taking into consideration those things and thinking, is it actually feasible? And also, is it needed for those areas, given that it's industrial adjacent, which typically does not require that screening. And so based on that, the staff recommends approval of the proposed zone change request as presented with the new revised PD document. And that concludes staff's report.
Thank you very much. Good comprehensive report as always. That brings us to the next item, which is the applicant presentation. Is the applicant here, and does the applicant wish to make a presentation? I would say welcome, but maybe welcome back is more appropriate, right? Name and address for the record, please. Thank you.
J. and Page McKee, 3912 Livingston Lake Court, Pearland, Texas. Well, it is, I think it's nice to see y'all again. Patrick, I think, hit pretty much everything that we, when we went back to, from your comments previously and going through. So our objective, and I want to touch on one thing while it's still on my mind, because he talked about the not being necessary for the screening in the industrial, touches industrial. We would prefer to leave that vegetation there simply because our neighbor on that piece of land there it would be better if we had a vegetation buffer between us and them. We just feel it would be a cleaner lot for us, even though this is the backside of our property.
Can I get help with this? Sorry, it's blocked out. I don't, Patrick, by any chance? Technical difficulties. Sorry.
It's budget season.
So while they're getting this loaded up, so I'm gonna turn this over to my wife Paige, and kind of the relationship of how this has kind of evolved. This project is I've been more kind of brawn kind of side of things and putting things together, where she has been absolutely just wonderful at the technical side of things, and then looking at things, and then working with our architects and our engineers to come up with different strategies of architectural undulations and nuances and what kind of tree to put out there. So I'm going to turn it over to her and let her have
I put this one together from last time just because there were several different questions and there was a lot of things that some of it we didn't understand, but the first part of it is, that we did purchase this in the heavy industrial district of Dixie Farm. And so a couple of things that I wanted to go over are, because we're right there, these are our neighbors. So as you drive from 35 to Pearland Parkway, you actually see the landfill. We've got Thai Metal Corp next to us. We've got a lot of areas that are just sitting out there, heavy industrial area of this landscape. Oh, that'll work better too. But even to the point of having the RVs sitting out front. One thing real quick. That's not it. I'm sorry. 1 second. I do apologize. This one. I hope this one's right. We will go over that in just 1 second. This computer's taking forever. And we might not get it, but no, it doesn't like me today. All right, well, that's okay. It's the right one though. Nope, downloaded the wrong one. That's all right though. They were in the other ones. But with the presentation that we did have, one of the things that we pulled up from what Patrick had put on there was that most of our buildings are actually hidden by the half acre that's up front. So there's a full half acre up front that we're leaving. That belongs to us. There's a sliver of land that's 0.1 acres that the city does own, but with the agreements of the city council that we've been working with, they did say, let's leave it. It's a very thick area. There we go. So in one area at the driveway, it's right at 90 feet from the road to the driveway. But as you go along, it's more close to 150 feet. So there's a long area there. You have a half acre up front, you have 60 feet of the pipeline easement, and then you have where we are going to be placing, for the UDC, all the plants and all those wonderful things that are going to be there, but also we're asking for a Semtech wall as opposed to masonry. The Semtech, the reason for that is because there's a 25-year on this Semtech. It also looks just like masonry, with the ability of being able to wash it and changes and not having the ground cracking it and all of those good things. So that's the other reason that we are asking that we can use a Semtech wall. A couple of the other things that we're asking for with the wall variations on that. The reason we're asking that it's 1 foot for every 20 feet as opposed to 1 for every 10 is because you actually only see 10 feet of wall. So it's a long wall and it would look like a zebra. It just really wouldn't look very aesthetically pleasing. So that's what we're trying to do, is make it look as nice and as clean as possible, as opposed to having several little tiny areas every 10 feet. So that would be the reason for it. We want it to look nice. We want it to look clean. We want it to look good. And so that's the thing. And you will only be able to see the first building. Building 2, you can barely see. Building 3, you will not be able to see at all because of the vegetation that's up front. The other is with the driveway. The reason that we asked that we don't have parking spaces out front, we do have 90 feet. But right next to us, this is their entrance. This is not their main entrance. Their main entrance is further down on Dixie Farm. This is just a delivery entrance. So we're not going to be impeding them at all, but we're going to make the entire area that 35 feet, and then we'll be able to split off. So you have 90 feet for someone to come in, pull up, check in, and then keep driving into a space. So that was the reason we asked for that variation.
One thing I'll note on that, with that gate there for Thai Metal Corp, that's actually a restricted access for them too. So that gate is closed 90% of the time as well.
So with our facility, We did mention that there was going to be 300, I think there was a total of 300, and I forgot now, 77. I've had too many things. Yes, 377. But this facility will actually we'll be putting Mueller steel buildings that are enclosed, and all of our enclosed are going to be on the perimeters. You have everything that's on the outside, that's going to all be enclosed, so that on the inside where we have covered, you will not be able to see all of the covered areas. Just in a small area there to the lower side, you'll be able to see in there, but for the most part, it's all going to be covered with buildings. You'll not be able to see past that. And then the back side is the detention area where we do want to leave the vegetation so that we do not see, we don't want our people seeing what's in the dump. Ooh, sorry. That whole area back there is the dump, and we want to keep it screened. So that is definitely something that we're looking at doing. We won't be constructing back there. There will be no construction going on back there at all. But with those buildings and also putting the interior carport, by the time we're finished, this is a $6 million project for us. So this is something that we're looking at putting a high-end facility into. This is not something that this isn't Bailey Road. So the reason we're asking that if you would please move this project forward. It's been approximately 3 years almost that we've owned this land, and we're ready to do something with it. Mm-hmm.
Does that conclude the presentation?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. All right, next item is persons wishing to speak for or against. Seeing no movement, or really no one else. It brings us to staff commissioner applicant discussion. Anybody?
Well, I appreciate the presentation from y'all, but y'all had me at hello. I'm glad y'all are coming. I think it's an excellent fit for out there. I'm glad that y'all can work with staff and get everything taken care of. We were discussing it. It's going to be the best looking building out there. So, it's an upgrade to the neighborhood. So, thank y'all.
Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate you listening to the commission's comments and coming back with some changes. One of my biggest concerns has been the comprehensive plan and how the use doesn't fall into play with that. But I do understand it's a weird property next to the landfill and kind of what's already there. And so I think giving some leniency on that is fine, I think, in this situation. I'll stay there.
Commissioner Henrichs here. I like the renderings. I just have a question. The renderings that they provided with the windows and the facade, that is part of this change?
Yes, yeah. So originally, I don't have it up right now, but originally you can imagine this metal kind of covered all of this portion below, and then kind of that translucent was at the top. So bringing in the change does include kind of that stone veneer here and those proposed windows, which are to be opaque, so you won't be able to see through, but they will give the feel of a window.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. And it looks much better than what was proposed before. And I don't have an issue with this being storage for boats, RVs, or whatever. I think it makes sense right next to being next to the businesses that are already there. That's it.
Thank you so much for your input and your diligence on working out a plan that's acceptable. The only thing that I see and have a concern about is your retention, being on the property line with the landfill. In your engineering, did you engineer any runoff from the landfill that would be very ascertaining to your retention, or become retention rather than detention?
So, Patrick, if you could pull up that overhead slide that actually shows the landfill. Okay. So, if you'll look, the straight line coming down here, you see the landfill, right? Our so our property line, and then where where our normal setback would be, and then where the beginning of the retention or detention pond would be, or the detention area would be. On the other side of this, there's actually quite a bit of room between us and the landfill. There's actually a road that access that Mr. Hill uses to access this back area way back over here, and that road actually borders our property. So there's a pipeline that actually runs parallel with our property line. So we have a pipeline that runs. It's on Mr. Hill's property, but the easement comes over and butts right up against our property line. So then we're outside of the easement is our property line, and then we would have a setback there. So I don't know the exact distance from our property line to the edge of where detention will begin. Based on looking at other dimensions in our drawing, it's at minimum 10 feet from the property line to where our detention will be.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank y'all for coming. Appreciate you all working with staff, and very much appreciate staff's efforts to bring us a nicer product. Thank you. The articulation every 20 feet, I can appreciate that it was a wider look, and I can understand what you're saying. If it were every 10 feet and I'm assuming that's 4 or 5 feet wide, it wouldn't have the feng shui look. You know, it would be a little off. Credit to your architect that is back now in the office, I understand, and doing a little better under the circumstances. But appreciate it very much. Anybody else have any comments? If not, let's take a vote. All those in favor, please signify by raising your right hand. Measure passes 7-0, and look forward to you getting built. And thanks for building in Pearland. That's it for new business. We have discussion items, a city council update.
Thank you, Chair. So on last Monday's council, there were two zone changes that y'all had previously heard. The first was that property at 8402 McCard Road. Y'all might remember that was the Cullen mixed use to general commercial that y'all ended up getting down to neighborhood services agreeing on. After some back and forth with council about the different potential uses and different possibilities for development of that property, council ended up approving general business with a 6-0 vote, and general business ended up being approved for that. Finally, on council's agenda last week was the zoning assignment for the MUD properties. If you recall, that's the Asian Town, Avalon Terrace, sections 1 through 6, and then the Lakeside Estates, section 1, with general business, R3 and SR12. All of that saw positive movement, also with the 6-0 vote. And with that, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you for that. Next P&Z meeting is May 5th. Anyone know that they will not be here? We have one commissioner not. I'm an iffy. So then it moves us to the 19th, the workshop. Does anyone, and also the regular meeting is also the 19th. We have a couple out as well. Ms. Jennifer, do you wish to have that, us send you an email Okay. It's not Memorial Day weekend, it's the prior weekend is Memorial Day. That's the Cinco de Mayo weekend. Not recognized as a national holiday. That's it. Unless there's anything further, thank y'all, and this meeting is adjourned at 7:15 p.m.